and kind of mows and does the lawn and puts the garbage out.
It's good to have neighbors like that.
I got all that stuff I put out to the girl with the paper. Did you know? She took it too. It was done. Yeah. Well, don't you get tired I was going to make bread this morning, and I didn't, and I had a loaf of bread for you. I still do bread, but I didn't get it done.
You got your hair done.
I didn't know for sure when she was coming, you know, when we got all...
Can you see
we're going to have an opening prayer, or you're just going to start in on it?
Can you see the red dot on the camera?
Yes.
That means that I've been recording all this time.
Oh, no, not all this.
So you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Now, can you see that board down there okay?
The board?
Yeah, he's kind of got that to prompt us a little bit.
I'm going, yeah.
You see yours down below there?
Yeah.
I think he would like you to talk about your early memories from the time you were born until the time we got married.
All right.
Just kind of go through in a kind of an orderly way that way. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was born in Clarkston, Utah in 1923. We loved living in Clarkston. We lived up on the hill right from the schoolhouse and close to the church. I was the second child that my parents had, and my older brother Earl and I were good friends and did a lot of things together because we were quite close. We had the schoolhouse right down below us. We loved going to school in the old schoolhouse. Made a lot of good friends there and enjoyed going to school. Then when it was time to go on the bus, we caught the bus right down in front of our place and rode the bus over to North Cache in Richmond, Utah. And we loved going there. We made a lot of good friends there. The one thing that was interesting was that I was always good friends with Rex's sister, Faye, and he was friends with my brother Earl. And so we were kind of in the same groups together, and I think that kind of got us knowing each other more. I mean, I knew Rex and knew his family, and his mother and my mother were good friends, and we were a little bit related and all. And so we were doing different things together, and Rex and I started getting, so we were going out a little bit, and we're getting friendly, and we seemed to enjoy each other, and we seemed to, the things that we both liked to do, and my family loved him, and his family were liking me, I think, and so that part worked out pretty darn good. And so we'd been going together for I can't remember how long when he got his mission call, and so he said he was going on a mission, and I told him I'd wait for him, and he said, "Oh, you probably won't wait." And I said, "Yes, I will." And I did wait for him. We wrote very regularly. So when he come home, I had been working down at Ogden at 2nd Street and living with one of our relatives, and he said that if I'd wait for him, he'd sure be glad, and I said I would. So he went on his mission, and we wrote regularly, and I did wait for him. And of course, by the time he got home, we knew World War II was in the big process, and I said to him, "Well, we're going to get married." And he said, "No, I don't think we better get married. I'm going to have to leave and go. I won't be here very long." They did let him stay home for a while because Rex's dad was raising turkeys, and the turkeys were going for the government to help feed. So he did get a few months, and I said, "Well, we're getting married. I waited for you all I'm going to." So we got married. And then he did get his greetings from Uncle Sam to go report. And by then, how long had we been married? But I was 3 months pregnant when he had his call to go be in the Marines. And so when he got down to Salt Lake, they all had to go in and have a big physical. And they told them all to get their clothes off and go in there and get their physical. So when Rex left, he said to me, "I'm going to try and get in the Navy. I think the Navy would be wonderful to be in the Navy." So when in the afternoon after the reports all come in, one of the big Marines officers came in, and he said, he read the names off, he read 4 names off. He said, "You 4 guys passed the physical, the best of all, You are now in the Marine Corps of the United States, so that's when he got in the Marines.
Does that bring us up to the date of that?
Am I up to that now?
A little bit, but what was it like when you were, say, 10 years old? What do you remember when you were 10?
Smaller, when you were a child.
Well, I remember a lot of
The old house and how you lived.
and spending a lot of time over at my Grandma Hagee's, because they had a great big yard, and Grandma, we bottled everything. It seemed like I spent half of my time cleaning peas or cleaning this and picking this. We did a lot of canning. Grandma Hagee was a great woman to can and put up stuff, and that's where I spent a lot of time. And I was always, it was for me, I don't know why, if I'd come home and no one was at my home, the mother wasn't there, no one was there, I'd go right straight to Grandma Hagee's. And right to this day, I hate to be in the house alone at night. I don't want to be. I just grew up never wanting to be in the house alone. I should say that Grandpa gave Earl a pony, the nicest pony. It was a horse I loved with all my heart. And he started taking the cows for Grandpa and Dad. The two pastures were down the street. Whose house would I know, but he would say they would.
About a mile and a half.
About a mile and a half. And so Earl started taking cows, and one morning he got me out there and he said, "Come and get on this horse and see how you'd liked it." And I got on that horse and fell in love with the horse. In fact, the day she died, I cried all day. But I soon was the one that took the cows. Earl gave me that up. So I'd take the cows down each morning and go down each night and get them. And then I could get off of the horse, and I didn't have to tie her up. She'd just stand there and wait for me till I got back on. And I guess I did that and then my other sisters, they didn't like the horse, and if they had to do it, they'd go on the bike. So it was me that did the bike, or did the cows. And then Dad was the water master, and so he had to take out the notices for people when they took the water. So I would get on the horse and take all the water masters out for my dad. I spent a lot of time on the horse. That horse was my love. I just absolutely loved that horse. I didn't go for other animals, but I just loved this horse. We called him Old Tiny. And but we spent a lot of time doing canning because Grandma Hagee believed in doing canning, and so of course,
living off the land.
Do you remember when you were baptized?
Yes, I do. I was baptized by Ivan Rasting, and he had a difficult time. His talking, he'd kind of stutter, and then he'd have to start over. And I've sometimes wondered why they let him do baptism. But the day I was baptized, they stood there to hear him, and he couldn't say it right. He got it stuttered and had to do it. I think he had to do me 3 times before it was correct. And I'll always remember that Ivan Rasting baptized me, but he had a hard time.
Was it during the winter or was it in the summer?
It was it was March, it was April, May.
The water was warm?
The water was warm. The water was warm in that old farm in the Clarkston ward. It was.
So what do you remember about your mother?
Well, she was a Gore. She was a worker. She could sew. She planted gardens. She was a woman that made bread and cinnamon rolls. She was always cooking something. She was a good cook. She was a good sewer. She was a good mother to us. She took good care of us. I couldn't have asked to have had a better mother.
And her last name was Orr?
Hagee.
Grandma Hagee.
Grandma Hagee.
Oh, okay.
My mother was a Hagee, Mary Hagee. And my dad was Raymond Mon Griffin.
So Annie.
My sister Annie.
Annie was a Hagee.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
So, any brothers and sisters?
I had an older brother, Earl, and he and I were close. We had the same friends. I think there were not that much between us. And then I had a sister June and a sister Annie, and then my brother Did I say Annie and June?
And Lorna.
And Lorna, and then my younger brother Claire is the last one.
Did you pull tricks on each other?
What?
Did you pull a lot of tricks on each other?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't
Was anyone
think so.
teasing? Was anybody teasing each other growing up, or?
No, not that I remember. Seemed like we had a good.
What about your dad?
Oh, Dad was he was so easy to live with, and he was always kind to everybody. He just looked out for people. In fact, I sometimes would be closer to my dad than I was to my mother even. Dad was he just had a way of you liked to be around him. He was just pleasant to be around. He had a good personality. He had a lot of health problems and had to go up to Lava a lot for rheumatism and getting that water. And I remember going up and staying a week with him up there, and
That was a mineral spring up in Idaho.
and that was just a special experience for me to have. You know, I think I was very close with my dad, maybe more than even my mother. I was real close with my dad. He and I spent a lot of time. And
Did he have a lot of callings in the church?
yes, he did. He worked in the. He helped them. He was when they played the church ball. He helped to do that, and he was on the old folks committee. Helped get that going.
Worked with the scouts.
What?
Worked with the scouts.
Yeah, and he worked with the scouts. He went on a mission. In fact, he was on a mission and just got home when his brother Albert died. They
It was
thought
a terrible epidemic then.
it was an epidemic, and they had his casket out on the front porch. They wouldn't let people even though he was dead. Dad said they wouldn't let people get by him because he had a horrible disease. But his dad died his brother.
How did you end up in Clarkston?
Started. I believe the pioneers were called to go there
Yeah.
by Brigham Young first.
Well, wasn't Grandpa with that bunch that came in and stayed at Tremont? They were going over to Bear Lake to check out. Someone had told him there's some good deals at Bear Lake. You should go over to Bear Lake. And they came up as far as Tremont and stayed overnight with the man there that they knew. And he said, well, we're going to a little town tomorrow to look it over. Why don't you come and go out there with us before you go over to Bear Lake to look? That's where they were going for looking for homes. And he said, we're going out to this little town and look. So was it Great-Grandpa Hagee then? Yeah. He went with them, and as soon as he got out there, he fell in love with Clarkston, and he never went to Bear Lake. He stayed in Clarkston. And
Do you remember the Washakie Indians?
oh, yes, I do. And I used to go upstairs. We had in our house, this upstairs was just partly finished off, but there was a window up there. And them Indians scare me to death. And as soon as I'd see them coming along the road with their bags to get food, you know, I'd run
Our
up.
folks would tease us. If we weren't good, they'd give us to the... They told us if we weren't good, they'd give us to the Indians. So
Yeah.
when the Indians come to visit, then what?
I'd go up and look through the window at the Indians. Yes, I do remember them coming a lot. They come to Clarkston a lot.
That's
Yeah.
good. What else do you remember when you were little? What about primary and Sunday school?
I got 2 years that I got got it in my book somewhere. I think when I was 12 years old, I never missed a primary, and they honored me and gave me a little book or something and said I'd had 100%. I loved to go to primary and Sunday school, and I can't remember a time in my life when I wasn't active going, you know. I think that's when I made friends with Cheryl Jardine, and I became the best of friends, and we're still to this day best friends. And then I got friendly with Rex's sister Faye. So I had a lot of good friends out in Clarkston that I just loved. It was a good place to grow up and have a family and things to do.
Did everybody know each other?
I think so.
It was a small town then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It wasn't.
About how many people back then?
That I wouldn't know, Rex.
Less than 1,000. 600 or 700.
And it's
A
about
large
and
ward.
it's about the same today, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 wards there now.
The wards are smaller now, but they're 2 now.
What advice would you give to your granddaughters and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren?
I tell them to stay close to their family and to be good members of the church, and always try to attend all their meetings and do what they ask them to do. To live the gospel has been the main thing in my whole life, is to depend on my Heavenly Father to guide us. I couldn't have made it without that when Rex was in the Marines.
You know, sometimes in generations, maybe 40, 50 years from now, you might have a great-great-grandchild that kind of wanders away. What
Yes.
advice would you give to that person?
Well, I tell him he was doing the wrong thing. That he'd never be happy going down that lane that he was going down. I'd tell him to get back into the church with his friends and try to do what the Lord had sent him here to do. We were sent here to do special things, and we have to do them.
Do you remember Rex when you were little?
Oh, did I remember Rex?
When you were little?
He said he remembers coming with his mother to see me when I was a new baby. I remember him a little, yes, because he was quite friendly with my brother Earl. I knew him, yeah. I think I knew him quite young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Because he was... And then, you know, we'd go down and play ball and all the kids. And then I was friends with all his cousins, and we'd be together with them a lot, you know, down playing on the school or the yard, down on the school.
You didn't have stores like you have now. If you
No.
want to go get something, you just go right to the store to get it. What was it like during the winter?
I think it was kind of tough, but you depended on my dad killed chickens and animals, and, you know, they prepared a lot more for eating and canned more. My mother was canning we were canning all the time, and Grandma Hagee had one of the first of those pressure cookers that you could use, and it seemed like as a young girl, I spent the biggest part of my time picking and then getting it ready to can so we'd have food for the winter. And that was hard, you know, but I did a lot of that because I was the oldest granddaughter, and that was the only one. The others didn't live there. Virginia wasn't married, and so we were the only grandchildren that Grandma had there for years and years.
Do you remember going to the root cellar very often during the winter?
The what?
The root cellar.
The wheat?
Yeah,
The root cellar.
out of the...
Oh, yes, the wheat, yes, I do. They kept some in a big, what did they call that, cement? Grandpa had some.
Silo?
Had a cement.
We used to have the granaries where we stored, and we used to have the old basements. And the root cellar was usually half underground, and
Yeah,
that's what you remember. And then
Yeah.
you put the potatoes and apples and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. We'd go down in there and get them.
How many wood stoves did you have in your house?
Well, we had the kitchen stove, the big kitchen stove, and then in the front room we had a
Heater.
burn wood in. Or coal, I guess, coal and wood.
So you pretty well had it a little bit rougher than maybe your great-great-great-grandchildren.
Uh-huh.
They've got it pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think it was hard growing up in those days.
So how would you describe your generation to the generation of today?
Oh, I don't know how you could describe it. I went up to the granddaughters the other day to see the kids what they got for Christmas. And when they have 3 little boys and 1 little girl. And when they started to show me what they had for Christmas, she had these little dolls that are really expensive, a little tall. She had 12 of them. And I just about passed out. I thought, if I would have got one of those all through my life, And the one Christmas I can remember the most of all in my life, we got up that morning and our stockings were all hanging behind that stove, all stolen. And the first thing I got up, I could see an orange in the top of my stocking, about like that, an orange. And I walked over and picked that orange up. And the orange had money in the ears, money in the mouth, money in the nose, and in the eyes. Quarters, we figured it come to $5 that it was in this orange. And that's the Christmas I remember the best of all. And it was Uncle John Hagee who was teaching school. And there was no other grandchildren. Nobody had children but Mother then. And he made all of us a sock and made it into money.
It was $1, not 5.
Oh, well, I guess it was $1, yeah, probably $1. And why, we thought we was the richest kids that ever lived. And I remember one time, Aunt Maggie, Cheryl's mother, and Uncle John Jardine, she was going to make bread. And she told Cheryl and I, you go over to the store, here's a nickel. You go over to the store and get me an East cake and I'll make bread. And on the way along the road, Cheryl and I got goofing, and we lost the nickel. And we hunted, and we hunted, and we hunted, and we couldn't find the nickel. And we went back and told Aunt Maggie we'd lost the nickel, and she said, that's the last nickel I had in my house. And she was just really sick. Then years later, when Cheryl was, so she started to drive in Uncle John's little truck before she was maybe as old as she should be, but I was over there one day and Uncle John came out and said, I need an air and you two jump in the truck and run over to Uncle Briggs and take this $20 bill and get me some change. I need some dimes and quarters, and, you know. So Cheryl and I got in the little car, and she was driving that little truck before should have been, but we got in the little truck, went sailing along the road, and she rolled the window down and put this $20 bill on her lap. And as we went riding along, it blew out the window. The $20, and so we stopped and got out, and we hunted and we hunted and we hunted, and we could not find that $20. And we went back and told Uncle John we'd lost the $20, and we said we're still going back and look for it. And he said, well, those kind of things happen. And I thought he wasn't near as upset over the $20 as Aunt Maggie was over the 5 cents. It was the time had passed.
Well, there was a lot of difference in between.
In between, yeah, there was a lot of difference in between. We were just a little.
Was that during the Depression?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was after the Depression that they were better off after.
Yeah.
Do you think your childhood developed your character today?
Now say that again.
Do you think your childhood developed your character today?
What you are today?
I guess, yeah.
So you're pretty grateful for that time.
Yes, I am. Very grateful.
Learning to work and all that.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Rex? 1919 or 1920? Yeah, 1919. What do you remember from 1919 to...
I guess some of our first memories are when we're 3 or 4 years old. I'm not sure. Sometimes we hear stories and think we remember the story, but my first memories was when my little sister was born, and I would have been 2.5 years older or more, maybe 3. And I remember learning a very important lesson that I wouldn't hit my little sister, things like that. And I remember that we lived in a rented place for a while, and then the thrill it was to finally buy a home when I was 5 and had a new brother, and to have a home of our own, even though it was only 2 rooms and no inside plumbing. It was all the water supply was out by the back door, and we had a washstand by the door that we'd wash our hands and faces, and one room with the old stove to cook and heat, and the other room was to sleep in the bed. And so those first memories were very humble. We were hardly ever left the little town, because travel was very limited. The old cars didn't go very far, and we depended most for the work on the farm and getting around and doing what we needed on our animals, just as Edna said about riding her horse. We had good animals, and we kind of grew our own eggs and meat and milk and all, and so we kind of lived with what we could grow and what we could preserve and what we could store for the winter and all that, and seldom left the little town.
What was your beds like? Were they feather beds?
Yes, yes, a feather bed. Oh, it was pure luxury to have a feather bed. Oh, to snuggle down in a feather bed. Sleep with my two brothers, 3 in a bed.
So, how would you buy the feather beds, or would you make them?
Oh, you had to make them. They used to, what they call flour sacks. The flour that we would store would come in 50-pound sacks, and so Mother would save the cotton sacks and sew them all together and make blankets. And then we had of course the heavier blankets for the top, but the beds were nice, and we slept all together and got along fine.
Did you have a wood-burning stoves or oil stoves, or did you have coal, or did you have to chop wood?
Usually in the fall of the year, the word would go around the town that the big coal car had come into the neighboring town, Trenton. The rail car would come in with a load of coal, and they could go with the teams of horses and get a load of coal for winter. So usually that was maybe a ton or more that you could haul with a team of horses on a wagon, and we would all arrange to go down when the coal car came into the neighboring town, Trenton. You'd go the 5 or 6 miles and get a load of coal, and then we went to the hills and mountains nearby for wood, and so we had wood and coal to burn.
What do you remember most about your dad?
I remember that he'd get up, we would stay in bed in the mornings until he would get up and make the fire, and he would always sing in the morning. Many of the old songs I remember fondly now that come back to mind, hearing my father sing in the morning as he'd get up and make the fire. And of course he was as strict as fathers were then. I mentioned that he got after me for hitting my little sister. You bet I learned a lesson about that, and about doing your work. And we were very proud to be able to get old enough to do work and use a shovel and use a hay and feed the animals and milk the cows, and so it was very, very good to work together, and Dad was an example of that. He and his brother had farmed together, and they were very close, and so Uncle Glenn was another parent to me, and we learned to all work together and run the little dry farm nearby over on the hills.
Do you remember your grandpa?
Very, two grandpas I had. They were so much opposite. One was a big, tall, lanky man, and the other was a little sharp man. And the one was very soft and spoken, and he patted me on the head and cuddled me in and whispered in my ear. The other grandpa was a big, lanky man that pitched me around in the air and bounced me on his knee and slapped me on the seat and teased me about wetting my pants and stuff like that. And so they were very opposite, but very fond. It was a very tragic when our big lanky grandpa died when I was fairly young, and it was a terrible tragedy.
How'd that happen?
He had lack of iron. What do they call that? Anemia?
Uh-huh.
Anemia.
They had to feed him a lot of liver.
He lacked in anemia and finally died from kidney failure, I think it is. And soon after that they began to give iron shots, and got along fine after that. But he lost his life because of...
How old was he then?
He must have been maybe 60. Comparatively young, seemed like to us.
You remember that day when he died?
Oh, very well. Very well. It was very sad. I had gone to many places with him in his big Rio speed wagon. We would drive in his car, and he would only knew 2 ways to drive, and that was full blast ahead. And if we went to buy supplies for his store, get supplies for his store, down to Cass Junction, which was 4 or 5 miles, and out on the country road, if he saw animals on the road, he'd stick his head out and begin to yell for them to get those things out of his way. He didn't think about slowing down or stopping. It was just trying to get through them any old way to make it.
Do you remember your emotions when he died?
Oh, very well. Going to Grandma especially.
Tough.
And feeling sad for Grandma. Poor Grandma. Poor.
I'll have to go through it though.
But families are close, and we take what we can do with it. Great lessons, really great. Great lessons. I should mention little Grandpa Jimmy. He was a little short Scotchman. He was the other grandpa. He was an authority in the church. You bet the gospel he preached was one that everybody took to. You better not doubt the gospel that he preached. And he had a special place to sit on the stand in the meetings.
Because you couldn't hear.
Mm-hmm. He had hearing problems, and he was very good. He did quite a bit of writing. Was the town notary. They would come to him to have their official documents notarized and made official, and he was the town notary, and so he did official business for the town. So that was my 2 grandpas. My 2 grandmas, I mentioned Grandma Tishy was very affectionate, loved us to death, all of us. And Grandma Annie was the other one. She was the very stern woman, but very gifted in health care. If we had a scratch or a cut or a bruise or a break, everybody said, "Run for Grandma Annie, run for Grandma Annie."
Everybody did that. I ran to her sometimes.
We never even thought about a doctor. We just ran for Grandma Annie.
She was good.
So how old was Grandma Annie?
She got to be very old. She became quite notable because she was the young girl that went and heard
Martin Harris.
the Martin Harris witness of the Book of Mormon. She went for her father on an errand to the old
Took in that water
home
nose.
where he lived, and asked if he would tell her about mine, our efforts here, kind of coach each other. She's already mentioned, I think, that when I returned from my mission, I felt like that it would be very unfair to her to be married and then me just leave and go on service. But she insisted, said she was not going to wait any longer, and we were married. In fact, she immediately became pregnant, and was pregnant when I was enlisted in the Marines. I went in the Marines, and she stayed home, and her folks invited her to come and live with them and stay with them while I was away in the service. And my folks lived nearby and promised that they would help care for my wife and baby when the baby came, and they did that.
Rex's dad, I couldn't have lived without him. If we ever had to go to the doctor, or even when she was born, Grandpa Ken went with me. He was the most wonderful father-in-law. And he'd come and get Kay every morning and take her for a ride, and he'd sing, Kay Dolly, I love you." And she loved her Grandpa Ken, but, you know.
But it was very difficult. The old train station left Logan, and the inductees would go, usually 20 or 30 of them each time, and I remember that we were all gathered around at the train station for the group to leave and go be enlisted.
It was hard.
And the war was in a desperate time. It was a terrible time in America, but one that united our country probably as never before. As sad as it was to have to be caught in such a time as the Pearl Harbor and have the sudden bombardment of our fleet and all that, still it united America, and we became very, very close to. Everybody wanted to do their part. People wanted to do be enlisted. We all went in to serve, and women and girls were building machines. You remember when they went to build machines, and the girls
Yeah.
were building aircraft and guns and all that, and oh,
Yeah, I do
it was a
remember.
great time to serve and do the best they can. My wife has mentioned turkeys, and Grandma Mamie went and picked turkeys that they could have turkey meat for the military, and she set the record in the little place where she picked 26 turkeys that one day and set the record for picking and fixing meat for the military.
For the mill.
That was about what, 1940, 41, 42?
The Pearl Harbor was in 41, and so it went on for 4 or 5 years, as I remember, and so that was during the early 40s that we were in the military.
What were you doing at that time, Edna? During
Like I say, I moved in with my parents. My dad worked in Ogden, so he was gone a lot, and Mother was the postmaster. Claire was then a little child, little boy, and I helped take care of him. And of course, then I had the baby, the little girl that we had. I helped my mother. She'd be in the post office. I'd help get the meals, and then every night I'd write a letter to Rex, and I'd go down to his family. I got real Electa and Grandpa Ken were my lifesavers when Rex was gone.
That's my sister.
Sister Electa. I couldn't have made it without them. And Rex was so good to write. I'd get his letters, and after they left the big place in California where they were training, they were sent to Hawaii to get ready to go fight the war. And he couldn't tell me where he was at or where they were being moved, because they'd censor our letters, and sometimes something would be scratched out that he'd written to me. But he said, my friend, and we're going to go to the temple. There's a temple where I am. That's how I knew he was in Hawaii, because he was able to talk about the temple. But anyway, we kept letters back and forth and back and forth, and he didn't hear about his little girl. He was out on a 2-week assignment or something, getting ready to go to Iwo Jima, and when he did get the letter, he found out he'd had a little girl. And my mother said, well, she's going to be named Kay, because that's Rex's case, number. Why don't I just tell my part about what he was gone right now? When they got in Hawaii and they were training to go into battle, we knew that was coming up. And one morning I got up early and turned on the radio, because I had the feeling that they
hadn't had any mail for a while.
Yeah, I had the feeling they're on their way to where they were going to go. And I turned on the radio, and it said, it was kind of early in the morning, and I got up and it said, the 5th Marine Division has landed on the island of Iwo Jima, and the killing is very high. It isn't how they expected. They thought they were going to go in there and get this little island in 3 days, and it took them 28. And the Japanese, all around that island, they had little caves, sort of caves. Is that what you call them, Rex Cave? And inside of there, they had them with all their machine stuff. They started to unload to get in there, and they started to kill them. And I thought, Rex will never make it. He'll never make it off of that island, because they killed 6,000. But I got Rex's dad, and I said, Rex is on Iwo. He's there. He's getting there. And he said, let's me and you and Mother go to the temple. And I said, okay. And I got ready, and they came, and we went to the temple. And he said, when we go in the prayer roll, Mother and I will go up in the prayer circle. But he said, you can sit there and say your own little prayer, which I did. And then when we got through at the temple, and I went through the veil, I got through the veil, and I was about that far away from the veil when I heard this voice, he will be protected. And I looked, and I looked, and I thought, who's talking to me? And then all of a sudden I remembered my patriarchal blessing. Listen to the still small voice when thou art discouraged or when trials come into your life. From that day on, I felt that Rex would live. But each day we would hear one of his very best friends from Brigham got killed the very first day, and his little baby was born the next day. what was there, 10,000 Marines that went in there, and nearly 7,000 of them were killed. There were very few, and Rex said that some of them, as they was trying to get in there, that land there in Ewell was mucky. You could just sink in it. It was hard to walk in it. And he said a lot of the guys were throwing up and hollering, "Help me, I can't do this." And they'd call Rex Tommy. They'd say, "Tommy, Tommy, come and help me, come and help me." And he said, I stood there on the shore and I remembered my patriarchal blessing. And I thought when I got that patriarchal blessing, why did it say that? But it said, "You will be fearless before your enemies." And he was helping these guys that were passing out. And then he said, I think about the same time that I was in the temple, he went down and crawled in this old foxhole. And he said, "Heavenly Father, if my life is spared, and I can go home to my wife and my little girl I've never seen, I'll dedicate my life to service in the church." And that was his prayer. And from the time he got home and went in the bishopric, went in bishop, went in the high council, went in the stake president council, and went stake president, he went 36 years without one Sunday off. He never went to church with me to help with the children, ever, but that was fine. One Sunday he was up conducting and Scott got away from me and was trying to get up there. He loved Rex's counselors. He just loved them two men, and he wanted to go up and sit them by them like a lot of the kids do now. Anyway, Rex was up conducting and he said, "Would the woman that has this stray little boy please come and take care of him?" Of course, I was already up trying to get him, and a lady that was new in the ward, when I went out and went down the stairs, she said, "If I was you, I'd never come back to this ward again from what that bishop did to you." And I said, "Well, that was my, that was my." Rex,
No, you just jumped and got us clear through. We're almost through now because
Rex came home.
37 years later.
Rex came home and was going to go back. He'd had a year of college and was going to go back to college. They could go free. But he never had a minute to go back to school with the...
No, we might be mixing up the...
there's two.
We need to go in order here a little bit. You're getting along near the end.
I was...
What, do you remember when you went on your mission?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go?
Minnesota. It was called the North Central States then. Very cold in Minnesota. Went up into the big North Woods among the Scandinavians.
Did your Grandpa Jardine give you a Book of Mormon or a Bible or before you went on your mission, or was that before the war?
He gave me one. I think when I went on my mission, he gave me "Jesus is the Christ." He'd marked that book with his own handwriting and really treasured it. He gave us, Edwin and I went at the same time, and he gave us each a book, and he gave me his little book of Jesus the Christ, which was leather bound.
And that was 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
After the 2 years on your mission, were you drafted?
The war started when I was a missionary 3 months, and the church and the government agreed that missionaries would be allowed to complete their time in the missions, but they would be obligated to enlist as soon as they were completed their allotted time. And so we agreed that when our missions were completed, that we would join the military.
And they did.
So you remember approaching Iwo Jima in the boats?
I think maybe I could say just a little bit in preparation for that. At the time when I finally completed my mission and got home, they were desperate for more men. We were losing a lot of men. And they were enlisting 17 and 18-year-old young boys. Let them out of high school early. Permission of their parents, they were enlisting them. And so when I was enlisted, it was with a lot of young boys, which I became very close to.
He did too.
And we trained, our little group trained to be messengers. We had a little ship-to-shore communication group that ran with the colonel to be his messengers. And he was a supply officer, and so I was lucky to be in a message center and in a message group, communication, and didn't have to be in the killing part as much. Even though we were right in the middle of it and all that going on, I never regretted not being able or not having to use my rifle so much and kill other people. The only one I remembered was one that they found a reclusive sniper and dragged him from cover and beat him to death, and being a part of that. And of course I have guilt feelings about beating a man to death, but at least I was in a communication outfit and we were doing messages and not so much killing others.
Mm-hmm. So, do you remember, did you have a lot of...
Iwo Jima, we had trained on the coast of Southern California and over in Hawaii, where the sand is gentle and the beach is long, and on the Iwo it was the big open ocean right into big banks of volcanic ash, and we were just almost helpless to try to, our vehicles couldn't move, we couldn't move, and we were out of training after being months on a troop ship and not physically fit, and so it was, as my wife has described, very difficult when we landed because of this terrible landing conditions and being out of shape and all, and then to run into all the enemy we didn't expect.
So did you see bullets hitting the water as you were getting on shore?
Oh, yeah.
It was wreckage all around. We couldn't make it in the first time and had to go back out and circle and try again, but it was very, very tough on the beach, and wreckage so deep that the beach was limited, and so it was very, very difficult because they were killing us all right on the beach, and the big mountain went right straight up above the beach and where they raised the famous flag, and so.
So the Air Force, did they help out a lot before you hit shore?
As my wife said, they were in caves. We didn't know all these caves. They were very light stone caves that they could carve very easily, and they were all in these caves. And the initial bombardment with the Navy and the Air Force before didn't do much because they were all hidden in the caves and did very little to accomplish much for our pre-invasion, and so they were just waiting for us when we landed.
Tell them about your good friend from Idaho, the very first time he went there in the cave.
He was killed in a cave.
Yeah. His parents got the word that he was missing in action. He went to look in the cave and see what was in there, and they were in there and killed him.
We never found any remains.
Rex says they buried thousands and thousands of Marines on the Iwo Jima grave.
So it was a terrible battle. We finally got through it and got back.
And they was getting ready to go to Japan.
I think maybe I could tell about after we had been in the battle and we're training for the invasion of Japan. We were very close to a small branch in the island, and they asked if we would like to attend a mission conference with them. They rented a bus and we rode across the island to a conference. And when we were on the way back, our little Mormon group had ridden with these saints from the branch, and we were so happy to be with them, and they were such good people. And to hear them preach, pray, and testify, and do all they did, and the Polynesians were such great musicians, singers especially, and to hear them sing and all that. And we were on the way back and talking about how great it was to be with them and enjoy all this with them. And our big van, our toughest Marine, said, "The best part of the whole damn meeting was when I heard that baby cry."
Rex, tell about Harold B.
That
Lee.
little cuss was bearing his testimony.
Tell about Harold B. Lee coming in the island after Eagle. Harold B. Lee.
Of course, combat is terrible because of the bitterness, the resulting bitterness. Good people can't do such terrible things and not feel guilty, and hatred and all melancholy and every bad thing.
And they all hated the Japanese there in Hawaii.
And so it was terrible afterward. And the guys were getting drunk and going out and beating up on anybody that looked Asiatic, and we just couldn't get over our terrible hate. And the Apostle Harold B. Lee visited the islands, and the mission president brought him to see us and called us up and asked us to have a meeting. We were surprised when here the apostle was over in the islands on blackout conditions and drove clear up to our end of the island and come to see us, and he called us to repentance and told us that we should say our prayers and beg the Lord to forgive us for hate, that the only way that we could be with Jesus is to love and not hate. And so he commanded us to pray that we could love and not hate. That if we hated, we'd go with the devil, and we'd have to love if we wanted to be with Jesus.
And I don't know of anyone that's loved the Japanese people.
Well, things happened later that made it possible.
But I'll never forget the Sunday that when Rex was bishop, and I was sitting back there at the back with the kids, and a Japanese girl walked in through the door, and the next thing I looked, Rex was up there and had his arms around this Japanese girl, loving her. And I thought, how come he's loving that Japanese girl like that? But she moved, she's still in our ward now. But she and Rex have a love for each other like you've never seen with anyone. They just...
There was a combination of things.
There was just something that they
loved.
loved.
Our daughter went down and lived by a Japanese family in California, and they just helped her when she needed help with her babies, and the best that they could be. And we had a returned missionary that came from Japan, a Japanese boy that came to live with Gene Tuller and go to school here, and he was the deacon's advisor, and everybody just loved little Kei Sakata. Oh, they just thought he was the greatest. And a number of other things. We had a grandson that went on a mission to Japan, and while I was in church authority, I had some church business with Elder Kikuchi, the Japanese general authority.
And you got to be good friends.
He told me about when the Americans were bombing and strafing Japan, that his father was in a small fishing fleet, and after the American fighters had completed their mission, they swung down around and went over and killed his father and some of the other, just strafed the innocent civilians who were out fishing, and killed a bunch of them. And how he hated the Americans for killing his father, who was just out fishing. And so we get to know good Japanese people. And when the apostle said all one nation isn't good and all one nation isn't bad, why, of course he was right.
Tell us about the pictures you have up there by your marine rug. The pictures up here on the wall.
One of them is the famous flag raising. Rosenthal, who took the picture, autographed it for me. He was a little civilian photographer. We all just thought the greatest of him. He never restricted the use of his famous photo and said anybody could use it for whatever purpose. And as we know, it's now a national monument, and it's quite a historic thing. The other is of the little group that we were messengers.
What rank were you?
Colonel.
Well, as low as you can get.
Colonel. I mean a colonel. Corporal. Corporal.
What's the little belt buckle?
Oh, it's one that they gave me. One of the local groups gave me when I gave a talk at the commemoration.
This last year he did 7. There's 2 things they give him in different schools. He did 7 programs. They said there's only 3 3 guys left that fall on, here in the valley now. They're all dead, but he did 7, and he just does an excellent job getting up there and telling about it.
Okay, after the war, you come home and you see your daughter.
That little part I'd like to tell. That's my ending part that I can tell. He got out about a few months before some of his best friends, because having a daughter, having a child, you got out by points at that time. And by having a daughter, it gave him a few more points than a lot of his other friends that weren't married. So he did get out. So he wrote and told me that he would be getting back to San Diego. That's where their base was in California. So when he got into California, he called me to tell me that he was there, you know. We hadn't seen each other, it'd been 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, that he was coming home, and he said, I want you and Dad to meet me in Ogden. I'll come in on the train, and I want you and Dad there to meet me at the railroad, or at the station, and told us what day it would be. So I came to Logan and bought me a cute new outfit. I wanted to look so cute, and I had a permanent lined up, or a hair lined up with Ellen Clark to do my hair. Well, the day before that he was supposed to return, Kay came down with the red measles. And I don't believe I ever had a sicker child. Mother and I held, Dad was away then, he was working in Ogden, but Mother and I held her nearly all day long. She cried and cried, and we couldn't settle her down. She just kept us both just going every minute. And I never combed my hair, and I had on an old top of a nightgown. And it was getting around 9 or 9:30, and I think Mother and I had just practically held and rocked her all day. She had the worst red measles I've ever known of a kid to have. Well, all of a sudden, it was about 9:30 at night, and I was just exhausted, and I started hearing this whistle, I'll be seeing you. And I let out a scream to my mother, and I hollered, that's Rex! And she said, go get in bed, you're just wore out, you're not even thinking straight. And the front door opens, and in he walks. And when I see him, I start running out and go down toward the kitchen, because I hadn't combed my hair and I was in this old gawky outfit. But he runs after me anyway. That's how we greeted each other, was being an old.
She said, get out, I'm not dressed, I'm not dressed.
And so
then later on we put the...
Then we left there and went down and woke all his
We
folks
put the little girl in the crib in the corner, and she screamed her gizzard out. I knew there hadn't been any strange men around there.
And she wouldn't have anything to do with him for about a week. She called Grandpa Ken her dad, I think. But one day she sidled up to him and called him Daddy. And from then on, them two had a close relationship. Well, Rex has with all 5 of our children.
How old is she now? How old is your daughter now? The one that...
She lives in Salt Lake now, and
She's
has
divorced.
her own big family and all, but coast to coast. And how old is Kay now?
About 70. She was married to a real prominent doctor that went off the rocks.
She is in her late 60s now.
Mm-hmm.
Close to 70.
Yeah.
She's getting close to 70.
Child number 2.
Was born 9 months and 15 minutes after I got home.
Not quite. She's the one that comes up every week. Her and her husband have been called to be in service. They're missionaries. They're missionaries, but they take care of they're going to do it church-wide now. Larry's got it going. Like
she was born just after I got home.
Yeah, but well, I'll tell him about that other lady.
No,
what they're
don't
doing.
talk about
No, that doesn't come in. Then we had
we named her Ruth. That was her second girl. She was born in '47. And then we had another girl 3 or so years later.
Karen and her.
And our boy,
Beth.
and then our other girl, so we have 5.
So Karen
And
was
Beth-
1959?
Mm-hmm.
Beth's husband has been in the hospital. He's home now, but he's been in there 6 months. He had a stroke.
So they're having trouble, y'all.
We don't know if they're going to make it or not.
So those the 3 there. There was who was the first one?
Kay,
Kay, and then Ruth,
and then Beth,
and then Beth,
then Scott.
and then Scott, and then Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Scott was the only boy.
Okay.
So, and they're good kids. They've been extra good kids. They just do anything for you.
They've lived in faraway places, but are now back all in the state.
What about your grandkids?
Oh,
Got 50.
this is going to take us an hour and a half
got
now.
51 grandchildren, and I think they're all some good grandkids too. They call and talk.
You know how it is to brag about a grandchild.
They call and talk to you about the church, and we got some good kids. We have. We're very, very grateful.
They all think I raised the flag.
Tell them about that one guy.
Well, grandkids are special. You can you can treat the grandkids any way you want because their parents are responsible for them, and so the professionals tell us that grandparents can do most anything as long as the child respects their own parent, and the parent is in charge, and the kid knows that and grows up knowing that the grandparents can just do or say or anything they want, and the grandkid can handle that pretty well as long as the parent is in charge of the discipline. So that works out well.
Rex has been very, very close to his grandchildren. He really has.
We have. You have.
Well, we both have.
What do you think? You gave them things.
Yeah.
Your grandkids now are between 20 and probably 43, 44.
They have families of their own because we have now a new generation of greats. And so the grandkids
We have 3 new ones on the way too.
They're the young parents now doing a great job raising another generation.
And their kids are probably, what, between...
Small children.
Yeah, maybe birth to about 5, 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. The oldest great-grandkids we have now are early teens.
You ever think of their future?
All the time, usually very proud because of the evidence we see where they're being in a good environment. We think the schools are better than they ever have been. Our kids all had degrees and graduate degrees, and so education has been very important. They're all good students. We had one of our grandkids was a valedictorian, and one was this and one was that, and so it is very comforting to know that they're all doing very well.
We've got one grandson that's been accepted to be the doctor in the Butch Clinic.
He'll soon move back.
He'll soon be back here.
Completing being a...
And then this other one that's in the back east in the top medical school, he got to pick. He was the valedictorian.
So now you know what the bumper sticker
Utah
says
State.
when you look at it, and it says on the bumper sticker, "Ask me about my grandson."
So we got 2 grandkids that'll be doctors, and they're Karen and Morgan's.
So we're very proud of all of that. Just as an example, the others are doing well too.
Yeah,
so
they are. There's
well.
several of them teaching school, and got some good kids.
Now, you were their age once. What type of advice would you give your grandkids?
I can't tell them to do much better than they're doing. Can you, dear?
Just stay close to their parents and the church and Heavenly Father. Get on their knees and remember their Heavenly Father. If I hadn't had the church, I would have never made it with Rex being gone.
We're very fortunate because we are all on good terms with each other. The Apostle Brother Bednar gave a talk recently about choosing not to hold grudges. That we can choose to hold a grudge or choose not to. And that we should choose not to, because if we hold a grudge, it hurts us, not the other person. And so for all of our kids to be kind and generous to each other and on good terms, obviously, that's really important. That whenever they get together, without exception, they're sociable and all that, and on good terms, and that's the best thing I can think of, is for families to be close.
What's Christmas like here?
Well,
not much anymore.
We used to always go down to Larry.
We used to go visit around on Christmas.
Well, and Larry was the bishop and would get the church, and we'd all go there for
Christmas party, but
Kay's got most of her kids. She's got 3 back east.
They're so far and scattered that
Yeah,
we can make a few visits, but being limited in travel and being limited in ability,
they're all getting farther away.
weaknesses of old age kind of contribute to backing off and just mostly living on memories.
Call them on the phone
How often do you think about them?
all the time. I think about my grandkids every night and night, day, and I just love them all. They're wonderful, wonderful, and great to have. I don't know what we do without them.
What about the children that are not born yet? What, 6, 7 generations from now?
That's hard to imagine.
Hard to
isn't it?
imagine for me.
How many people in your posterity would there be? Just guessing. 7 generations.
Oh,
I don't know.
that's a good question. You'd have to do the arithmetic on that. That'd be hundreds and even thousands,
Yeah.
I think. What do you
Because
say?
now we're close.
How many would that be?
I bet between 5 and 1,000.
See, we're getting close
Just
to it.
imagine. Just imagine.
When you think what we're getting
When we
close
see
to
these
now.
family reunions now, we mentioned the old Martin Harris witness to the Book of Mormon, and out to the little cemetery where he's buried, they had a reunion last summer, and my word, there were hundreds of his descendants that came, and that was just the ones that could come. And in his lifetime, look at all those descendants he has now.
What advice do you give them? 7 generations from now.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, I don't think when we think about all the conditions that change in our lifetime, all the change we've seen from cars that hardly would run, we had to depend on the animals, and then the good cars we have now, and then more recently, all the great advancements in technology, which is way beyond what we can even appreciate. And think about smartphones and all that they have now, and they tell us that technology is going to, information and technology is increasing at an ever-increasing rate. So what in the world is there left to find out?
Yeah.
These generations to come, what will it be like then? What will it be like
I
then?
can't imagine.
Can't imagine.
The way it's
You're
changed.
exactly right, dear. Can't
I
imagine.
can't imagine.
What do you hope for them?
I hope they can handle it. I can hope that it doesn't take them in the wrong direction. That all this will be an advantage and not a disadvantage.
I keep thinking maybe that we'll all be over there on it together.
The devil isn't going to relax, we know that.
I don't think the Lord can let it go.
Even the great advances we have now, that there's evil in it. There's terrible pornography and awful
I just think the Lord
parts of the technology we have now that would have been never even heard of not too long ago, and who knows what it'll be like.
What's your testimony of the church, the gospel?
You what?
Do you have a testimony?
I sure hope I do. I've always
Well, you
had
kind of
one.
bore it a little bit by saying you heard the still small voice.
Yeah.
What's the still small voice you
Still
talked
small
about?
voice. I was grateful for it that day because it seemed like from that day on, I knew Rex would come home, but I didn't until then, when it said he will be.
Well, what about the
protected.
prophet? Do you believe we have a prophet?
Oh, do I believe we have a prophet? I sat by some of them. Brother Hunter, he and I sat right across from each other when Rex was called to be a, what do you call it? We've had some, went down to some of their, they've had the stake presidents comes down to their birthday parties, and we've been in on a lot of nice things. Had them in our home. I can't tell you how many general authorities ate and slept in our house. One time we had 2. One down, we had one back in that bedroom and one downstairs in the bedroom.
Well, most of all, of course, is the testimony of the Savior. He's the central part, and to have the little kids believe, and talk to the little kids. They've been to primary, and what did you do in primary? We talked about Jesus. We sung a song about Jesus. And Jesus was a good man, and to hear the little kids, it's almost as if they believe it by tradition. And of course they're going to have to do more than that later as they think seriously in their own lives, but it's a great thing to think that this posterity we have now, without exception that I know, are honest, true, and chaste. They're keeping the laws of the land, and they're being good citizens, and that's really the important part. It all boils down into a sincere belief in the gospel of the Savior.
Express your love to each individual child that you have right now.
Well, I don't know. I'd rather tease them.
No, you don't. You talk.
But you have to cuddle them sometimes and talk to them personally a little bit. And we were just the other night. We were out to our granddaughter's place, and little Will come and cuddled up to me, and I said, "Will, you're a good boy," and he smiled. You work hard. You're a good student, And he agreed with me and smiled, and he liked me to compliment him, and that's just natural, I guess.
If it was both of your last day here on earth, what would you want to tell your children and grandchildren?
Get out of here and leave me alone.
To stay close to the church and keep their testimonies to the church.
That's the number one thing, isn't it?
That's the number one thing with church.
Amen. Amen, wife.
That's what I'd like them to do.
Yeah.
We're done.
Go on missions. And they're doing
Thank you. Thank you.